This is All India Radio. You will now hear comments from the press. The Indian Express, in its editorial titled "A Package for BSNL," says Union Minister Arjun Ram Meghwal has announced that the government is planning a financial package for a cash-strapped BSNL. But it is unlikely that a cash infusion or any manner of assistance can facilitate a sustainable turnaround in the fortunes of the beleaguered telco. Coming at a time when its own revenues are under pressure, the government must undertake a careful cost-benefit analysis to examine whether the money it spends to prop up these loss-making firms is better spent in areas with more pressing needs. BSNL blames the fierce price war as well as the lack of 4G spectrum for its dire financial situation. But there is more to the story. Its expenditure on salaries, it has around 1.8 lakh employees, touched 75% of revenues in 2018-19. For private telcos, it is a fraction of this amount. Stringent procurement guidelines have led to delays in purchasing equipment, hampering operations. Losses have surged, rising to rupees 14,202 crore in 2018-19. And though the non-availability of spectrum may have hurt its operations, revenue from data increasingly accounts for a greater share of total revenue. Even if BSNL is allocated the 4G spectrum it desires, it will still need additional funds to ensure a smooth rollout of services. The Statesman, in its editorial title "China's Olive Branch," writes, "Across the Pacific, there is a silver lining shimmering across the choppy waves, but Wednesday's development does not signify that China and the United States of America are inching towards a trade agreement." China has announced a tariff waiver covering a range of products that are on the U.S. import lists. The Customs Tariff Commission of the State Council has unveiled 2 tariff exclusion lists of 16 items, including fish meal, raw materials used in cancer drugs, and some lubricants. All items on the 2 lists will be excluded from additional tariffs for a year up to 16 September 2020. This would mean that the items will not be subject to additional tariffs imposed by China on U.S. products as countermeasures to U.S. Section 301 measures. Beijing's unilateral decision does mark a forward movement on a contentious issue. The development is significant because it will, to some extent, ease the impact of the China-US trade disputes for enterprises in both countries. It is expected to buttress the development of the companies involved and boost their confidence. It can also help enterprises to control production costs, especially for some importers in the agricultural and chemical industries, and to stabilize market supply of certain products. Altogether, it is a modest olive branch from President Xi Jinping to President Trump. Having said that, it needs to be noted that the list does not include what they call big-ticket items, notably soybean and other agricultural items at the core of the U.S. economic interest that can shape a trade deal. The Times of India, in its editorial titled "Tears of Sivan," writes, "One of the defining images of the week that went by was that of ISRO chief K. Sivan breaking down in tears as the Prime Minister consoled him. While many Indians were invested in the fate of the Chandrayaan moon lander, it was a labor of love and a feat of collaboration and effort by the space research team, and Sivan could not hold back his emotions. But that sight of a man openly crying on another man's shoulders is progress of another kind. Men don't cry, mard ko dard nahi hota is a foundation plank of a culture that represses both men and women with strictly defined roles. Boys are taught to be strong by being stoic, by squashing any natural welling up of hurt or vulnerability, by mocking and despising others for being weak. We applaud manful efforts to conceal feelings, those awkward pats and thumbs that signal appropriate distance and autonomy even between close male friends. The inability to constantly conform to the image of dominant masculinity causes boys shame and insecurity, which they direct toward those weaker, like bullying rituals in all male institutions or groups or violence. Girls, meanwhile, are allowed softness and tears and verbal catharsis, but discouraged from being openly forceful or hard-headed. This makes both men and women less than fully human, and we relate to each other in stereotypical Mars and Venus ways. Instead, if we choose to go against this gendered grain and allowed men to cry and console and let women be openly assertive, we could liberate ourselves a little. Those were the comments from the press presented to you by the News Services Division of All India Radio.